Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was scheduled for a standard 8-hour evening shift and came in early anyway. The way you do when your name is attached to a quiet corner of a place that never sleeps. The lounge sat like a glass jewelry box above the main international concourse. Soundproofed panes the size of billboards, a mezzanine bar with a view of gates and jet bridges, and a small kitchen hidden behind a walnut-paneled service wall. My badge opened 3 doors. The staff entrance near the freight lift, the beverage storeroom with its humming compressors, and the back corridor to a stairwell that only ever mattered during fire drills. On my lanyard, a small steel key that fit the handcuff hinges of the keg tap and the dumbwaiter's override. On the POS screen, a list of cocktails with names too clever by half. On the counter, lines of clean glassware that clinked with the way airports make time feel expensive. I'm a bartender, or at least that's the part of me that made sense at the Oriole Sky Lounge in Terminal 3. The airport is a city, and in this city I knew where to find a screwdriver long after the hardware store closed, how to get a porter to move a pallet at midnight, who to call when a refrigerator's drain line froze. My name is Luca, 33. I learned to count tips by the taste of jet fuel in the air. Until that day, the worst emergency I'd seen in the lounge was a bag left with a passport inside, or an argument about boarding order at the reception desk. That afternoon, I polished the brass rails and lined up the bidders like toy soldiers, and watched clouds move over the runway through glass that kept the world polite and far away. At 5, a flight attendant in Navy stepped in, cheeks wind-chapped from the ramp. "They're holding departures," she said, breath fogging the glass near my station. "Medical alert, something in the domestic wing, people fainting." "Take it easy," I told her, and poured still water into a clean highball. "Sit anywhere." Her ID said Sophie Lane, and she carried that weary poise that comes with 2 time zones before lunch. She set her overnight bag under the bar stool and studied her phone like it had a verdict to deliver. Around us, the lounge performed its illusion. Frosted partitions, private phone booths that muffled confessions, a children's nook glowing with quiet cartoons. The first arrivals trickled in. 2 tech founders with headphones hanging around their necks, a retired couple under a fleece with an airline's logo, an off-duty pilot in a white shirt with his tie loosened to the last safe notch. The pilot flashed his badge at me like a reflex, a polite gesture, a habit from a system built on rules. By 6, cancellations began to populate the big screen behind me. The font changed from green to yellow to red in that slow way that says we know more than we're saying. I poured club soda, cappuccinos, a run of martinis that made a straight line across the bar. Lara, our shift lead, leaned against the service station and watched the concourse below through her reflection in the glass. She was small and fast, her hair in a no-nonsense knot, a radio clipped to her belt. Priya worked the espresso machine. Timur washed glassware with headphone buds in, swaying to a beat that didn't belong to this place. The gate agents were ants in pressed uniforms, their mouths opening and closing without sound behind our glass. Then the order came in a low voice on Lara's radio, a line of syllables that tightened her shoulders in one quick motion. She held it to her ear, listened, said, "Copy," and then waved me over. "Ops says there was a breach in the main concourse. They want lounge doors sealed," she told me. "Right now. Do not admit anyone you can't verify as already within our occupancy list, and no exceptions." "You're joking," I said, unable to help the little laugh. "We're a bar, Lara." She showed me her phone, the text message from the duty manager. The words were bureaucratic, even then. Her guidance, lockdown, Keep clients safe, shelter in place. The next line snapped any sarcasm out of the room. Primary concourse unstable. Do not open to public. EMS delayed. Timur pulled his earbuds out like someone had tapped his shoulder. Lockdown. It'll pass, Priya said, but she said it like a wish. She moved to the reception desk where the motor for the security shutter sat behind an oak panel, and I followed her to help roll it down. It was the first time I'd heard that heavy door close without a drill. A hard growl of aluminum teeth sliding into a track, then a quiet click that felt final. To the guests, we were a pain of serenity. To us, the glass spun into a mirror that made our own faces look like someone else's. From above, the main concourse looked like a river that had realized it could run uphill. Something was wrong in the flow. People moved without the geometry travelers obey, not in lines, not toward gates, but away from something that punched through their posture. An officer's cap flashed and then was gone. A concession stand's overhead lights flickered, and then were replaced by the strobe of a security beacon further down. The soundproofing sanitized it all. Movement without the sound of it, as if you were watching an aquarium and the fish had decided to panic. The wealthy know when a room is about to become the wrong room. A hedge fund manager named Caldwell, someone who wore his watch like a small personal billboard, walked up to the bar. "We're sealed in, yes? This is the safe zone," he said, not asked. "We're here until Ops says otherwise," I told him. "It'll be fine." He looked past me at the storeroom door. "How much water do you have? Food? What's your policy on rationing? Who has authority?" "Right now, I'm authorized to make a decent old-fashioned," I said, which landed neither as humor nor comfort. Sophie, the flight attendant, lifted her head from her phone. "Don't drink too much," she told Caldwell. "Dehydration will do you no favors." The off-duty pilot introduced himself as Reeves. He had a small airband handheld radio in his bag, the kind pilots use to listen to tower frequencies as they walk from gate to gate. "This is passive only, receiving," he told us, because even now we felt the need to say the rules out loud. He extended the stubby antenna and pressed the volume wheel. Static. A voice. "Stand by. Priority medical at gate B19. Negative on units available. Repeat, negative." We listen to a language that doesn't leave room for panic. Numbers, call signs. Terms like airside and landside that divide where a person belongs. The voice on the crash channel kept asking for responders that didn't arrive. I did the only thing that felt practical: inventory. I entered the storeroom and counted with the speed of someone trying not to hear the word negative again. 4 cases of bottled water, 2 of sparkling, 6 large tins of coffee, beer kegs at 3/4 and half, shelves of spirits, 32 bags of kettle chips, 4 catering trays with covered sandwiches, wrapped hours ago and still cold, a double-door fridge with wheels of cheese and greens for garnish, a 6-gallon Hoshizaki ice bin full to the lip, skating by the quarter hour, the emergency kit, an AED, bandages, gloves, a foil blanket, compresses, 1 fire extinguisher, an oxygen canister for medical emergencies, small and light, the kind the airline nurse once checked and rechecked on a slow afternoon. In the kitchen, chef's knives locked to a magnetic strip, a citrus knife on the bar with a curved blade that could fillet a lemon like you were drawing a line with a pen. No firearms, obviously. No illusions about calling for one. I brought the water out and set some behind the bar and stashed the rest under the service counter. "We might have power," Lara said as if crossing a line off a list. "We might have HVAC." She tapped the thermostat, then the fire panel screen. "But we should assume this is going to be a night, maybe 2. "A night," Caldwell repeated. "We can manage a night. The first person who showed signs inside the lounge was a young woman in a knit sweater on one of the low couches near the window. Her name was Nina. Her boarding pass told the scanner at the reception desk when she entered. 27. Software project manager of her bag tag told the truth. She stood abruptly, as if woken from a falling dream, and swayed, hands reaching for a railing that wasn't there. Her boyfriend caught her elbow, but she shook herself free and stared at the glass like she expected it to tell her something. Sophie noticed first. Flight attendants are trained to see what most people miss, and walked to her with the steady pace of someone who won't trip a skittish horse. "Hi, I'm Sophie," she said, gentle. "Let's sit. You look overheated. Did you eat?" Nina blinked, then hissed and clutched her forearm like something unseen had caught her. Not a scream, YouTube-friendly softness, but a sound you feel in the muscle. I'm fine," she said. "I just need the restroom." She moved in a straight line to the corridor that led to the suites and bathrooms, her boyfriend following. Sophie looked at me. "Isolation," she said softly. "If it worsens, we isolate. We don't let panic be the only thing we catch." There's a shape to decisions when you've been told you're responsible for the wealthy because the doors are sealed. You think in circles so you won't have to think in lines that end at a wall. We moved like we were inside a safety video. Lara assigned Priya to the front desk to handle questions with that front desk voice. Reeves kept his radio open, the volume low enough that only the staff could hear. Malik from airport maintenance, who had ducked in just before we shut the shutter, 6'2", ball cap, reflective vest, showed us the electrical closet behind the paneling and the lockout switch for the maglock, warning that it needed a badge and a code neither of us had. If the fire panel sees heat or smoke, the door unlocks on its own, he told us. Otherwise, we need ops to pop it from their system. Which is to say, we were in a box other people could open at a distance, if those other people were there at all. Below, the concourse was not a concourse anymore. People flowed and then surged and then evaporated into corners. Airport police formed a ring around a point we couldn't see, then broke away. A gate agent's blue jacket appeared at a run, then disappeared. The feeling of separation grew, like you were on a ship whose engines had gone quiet while you were looking the other way. I made sandwiches. It was something I could do. I cut them diagonally and stacked them on plates and covered them with domes of plastic like the ones you see at trade shows. We passed them on trays in that careful way that says civility still beats scarcity. Caldwell took 3 and said they were for his wife, who wasn't there. As the hour ticked past 7, the lights off the ramp began to look brighter than the ones overhead. The glow outside was steady. The ones inside dimmed for a moment, then came back. The glass vibrated very slightly with a force from below, a thud you feel in your feet and then in your stomach. Reeves raised a hand as if calming a horse. That was a baggage tug hitting a bollard, he said, like it was a parlor trick. Or a big cart, something heavy. Nina did not come back from the restroom. Her boyfriend returned alone, face pale in a way that told its own story. She was shivering, he said, voice paper-thin. Then she asked me not to touch her. She said her head felt like a storm. She asked me to get an attendant. Then she locked the stall. Sophie took the key to the family restroom and the medical kit. She asked me for a bottle of water. "Mouth of the room," she told me. "Keep people back. Let me try talking first." I stood at the corridor entrance, a place usually reserved for guests with good shoes, and positioned a chair like a small drawbridge. The ceiling here was lower, the carpet softer, the lights set to warm to signal quiet. Sophie spoke through the door, soft. "I'm right here. I won't open without your okay." There were words back, too low to hear. Once, a thump. Sophie breathed in, breathed out, and I watched her count in her head, Then she cracked the door open a sliver, hand visibly empty, and slipped inside. When she came out, her face had that focused stillness of someone who has decided which two choices she can live with. "She's running hot," Sophie said to me quietly. "Disoriented, no visible injuries. No, you know." She didn't say blood. Neither of us did. "We'll give her fluids, keep her in there, and we need to note the time. If her condition changes, we escalate. And Luca, no one else goes into these washrooms except one attendant at a time. We need the doors to mean something." The phrase, "her condition changes," did a lot of work in one sentence. I nodded. By 8, the airport's outer skin had developed a new texture. The runways were lit like runways always are at night, a science fiction road to nowhere. But the halls below us were darker, the light interrupted by objects that didn't belong. A food cart pushed at an angle, a fallen queuing stanchion, a carry-on tipped over and abandoned on its side. People moved in groups that were not families. The motion sensors on a set of retail shutters down the way kept blinking every time something brushed by, so you saw the world with a nervous metronome. In the distance, the head of a passenger bus glowed like a lighthouse, then went still. Reeves listened to the radio and cut his eyes toward me. "Tower is isolated," he said under his breath. "Ground is trying to move vehicles off certain taxiways and can't find drivers. ARFF is responding somewhere. They keep saying, 'Do not open to public ingress.' That's us." "Like a trap," Priya said quietly from the corner. "Like a lifeboat," Caldwell corrected too loud. "Both can be true," I said, and felt that in my ribs. We passed water in paper cups. We let people charge their phones at a power strip we zip-tied to a table leg so it wouldn't walk away. We talked in our service voices, the ones that turn all frayed edges smooth. People gossiped in a way that sounded like prayer. A child slept with a superhero blanket over their head. The televisions at the far end showed a view from outside the airport. A helicopter shot looking down at a thing you could not identify. The ticker used words like incident and response. No one used the word outbreak. They were good at their jobs, those anchors. At 9, the lights in our ceiling went off for 5 seconds and came back at half strength. Everyone in the lounge looked up as one. The bar's back wall, a display of bottles lit from behind like colored candy, dimmed to something less festive. That was when Dr. Hua, a woman in a gray sweater with tired eyes, put her own voice in the room. She had been quiet, listening, sipping a tea and counting breaths. "We should set up zones," she said. "Not to scare anyone, but because it will help. A place for people who feel unwell with one person attending. A check-in list. People should write down how they feel, even if it's fine. A place to rest that is not near exits or the glass. And we should find every wipe, every glove." "Doctor?" Laura asked. "Epidemiology," she said. "Not a full MD, but adjacent." "Close enough," I said, "because if you make a martini for a person long enough, you get to choose who you believe in." We used the conference room at the back. It had a frosted glass wall and a heavy wood door, and a smart panel that could be turned off easily. We set 2 lounge chairs inside and a carafe of water and the medical kit. Sophie took position outside. We called it the quiet room. The name helped. Nina moved there at 10 on her own 2 feet. She looked like a person dreaming with their eyes open. She thanked Sophie for the water. "I'm sorry," she said for nothing. Inside the quiet room, she sat and closed her eyes and placed her hands on the arms of the chair like a passenger bracing for landing. Outside, a man in a blazer knocked on the shutter we had lowered over the lounge entrance from the concourse. He knocked with the flat of his hand, then harder. He was red-faced from exertion. his tie loose. He mouthed words I couldn't hear. He held up a badge I couldn't read through security glass, then braced a shoulder and pushed with his whole weight. The shutter didn't move. He panted, and for a moment we watched each other, two fish separated by an aquarium wall. Then someone far below him moved much faster than a person being chased by a flight delay. They collided with him. He fell. He did not rise at once. Sophie put a hand over her mouth. Reeves lowered his radio. Lara looked at me and said, "We hold." We held. We became that warship whose decks you're allowed to visit but not touch. People came to the bar and asked for comfort in liquid form. I poured carefully and watered down the pour more than they noticed. Priya and I placed bowls of snack mix in places where people could reach without creating clumps of bodies. Caldwell kept muttering about authority, but Malik's bulk and steady voice had an authority that didn't need muttering. "We'll do what keeps the room calm," Malik said. "The bar is a control tower now." At 11, Nina stood and walked, fast, to the quiet room door and pressed her palms flat against the glass. The motion sensor lights chased each other down the back hall as if the room were applauding. Sophie got there first. Nina's face was flushed now, her eyes wet. "It's too loud," she said through the glass, though the lounge was library quiet. My head, like air pressure changing. Sophie nodded and laid a hand flat to the glass by Nina's hand. "Stay with me," she said. "We can turn down the lights." Her voice sent calm ripples down that narrow hall. Then Nina stiffened, as if hearing something none of us could, and her head turned not toward Sophie but toward the glass overlooking the concourse, the way a cat hears a sound you do not. She angled her body in 2 quick steps like a dancer stepping into a line. She pressed her ear to the frosted panel as if trying to hear deeper into the wall. Her forehead touched, then her cheek, then her hands clawed for grip on something that had no texture. I've worked around people most of my life. You learn to tell when someone is choosing and when their body is choosing for them. This was not choice. Sophie held up a hand to me and said, "No closer," without looking. Then her other hand went to the AED case and she set it on the floor at her feet like a marker for a boundary. Dr. Hua stood at the mouth of the hall and said calmly, "We ventilate the quiet room from the corridor only. We keep the door closed. We observe. We do not crowd. Crowding feeds panic. Panic feeds panic. We did not crowd. We watched the shadows of Nina's hands through the frosted glass move in lines that made sense only to her. We heard her say a word I could not make out, and then another, and then a sigh, like a person stepping into a cold pool and deciding to stay. At midnight, the lounge changed temperature by 1 degree. You could feel it in your forearms, in the exposed skin of your neck. Something had cycled in the HVAC and decided occupied after hours was a different target. The bar taps lost a hair of pressure. The lights stayed where they were, but the noise the refrigerators made became the loudest thing in the room. The rest of the airport, and this is something people don't know, has a smell at midnight that is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It is metal and cleaner and stale air and perfume and the smallest molecule of fuel and a lot of tired. The glass carried none of it. We were still sealed. At 1, Reeves's radio delivered words we had not yet heard. Advise all contained areas. Do not accept additional persons from uncontrolled zones. Maintain integrity. Airfield units are pivoting to perimeter. Repeat, do not open to public ingress. The phrase, contained area, made the lounge sound like a science exhibit. Caldwell said it again. A lifeboat. A lifeboat on land is a box, Priya said. At 2, Caldwell suggested we inventory guests for special skills. It should have sounded useful. It sounded like drawing a line. He made a list with a borrowed pen, and before he asked, People volunteered because that's what people do when the air turns thin. "Nurse, travel," said a woman with calloused hands and kind eyes. "Plumbing," said a man with knuckles like he'd used tools most of his life. "Teacher," said a woman who had calmed a knot of children we had not noticed until we noticed them all at once. "Security contractor," said a man I did not like on sight, which is a flaw of mine when men are made entirely of shoulders. He gave his name as James, but everything about him said he preferred to be called Sir. He had an earpiece without a radio and boots that were too soft not to be for moving quietly. "I can help you set up a perimeter," he told Malik. And Malik said, not unkindly, "Our perimeter is a steel shutter and 6 inches of glass, but thank you." "You'll want layers," James said, and looked deliberately at the knives on the magnetic strip in the kitchen. "You'll want rules about tools. You'll want to stop sounding like you're making a pitch," Sophie said, voice neutral as a level bubble. We slept in shifts. We stacked cushions from spare chairs against the walls and booked the small nap suites in 1-hour blocks, using a clipboard and the fairness that fair people can muster when fairness is all they've got. I dozed on the floor behind the bar with my jacket under my head and a dish towel over my eyes. I woke to the tiny hiss of the espresso machine refilling itself. For a second, the sound felt normal enough to erase the other 20 sounds that said nothing was normal. When I sat up, Priya placed a paper cup in my hand and said, "If we were home, we'd be sleeping. That means this counts." At 4, something struck the glass with a flat metallic slap. Everyone awake went still and those asleep woke cleanly. We turned as one toward the concourse. The slap came again. Not a person, not a hand, but something you hear when a heavy object hits glass with momentum, slides, and leaves a smudge you can't quite see. The object was a luggage cart tipped at an angle. Someone had pushed it with a sprint and let go. It hit the glass at a 45-degree angle and slid, heaving to a stop. Behind it, people moved in fits, in stutters. They were tired and not tired. The cart's handle was bent. The glass did not crack. This was laminated, tested, rated, but the sound made the lounge vibrate like a bowl struck with a spoon. "Please," said an older man at the window, one of ours. "Please don't look." He said it to no one and to everyone. At 5, the airport just beyond our glass wore the light that looks like morning even when you can't see a sun. The runway beacons pulsed like collective heartbeat. And in the quiet room, Nina rose. She stood, smoothed her sweater with a motion that had nothing of fever in it, and placed her hands on the door. She looked out through the frosted panel, and I knew when her eyes found mine because of the way my chest tightened. It's odd, the clarity that arrives with fear. You can smell every lemon in the bar in 1 second. You can see fingerprints you never noticed on the brushed steel. She pressed the handle down and opened the door with fluid confidence. Sophie stepped back to give her space and also to make space for her own choices. Nina walked into the corridor like someone exiting a private call. "I'm okay," she said, and that made no one relax. "How do you feel?" Dr. Hua asked, voice even. She stood 3 steps back, hands visible. "Hungry," Nina said, and smiled a smile that didn't make the corners of her eyes move. "I can help. I think I know where things are." It was not the answer we expected. It was too easy to accept. "Let's sit," Sophie said, calm as always. "Let's check your temperature." "I'm fine," Nina repeated, and took a small step closer to Dr. Hua, and then another to me. There was something wrong in the math of that distance. Her steps didn't sound like steps, more like the absence of them. She stopped at the mouth of the corridor and spun her head toward the glass wall, that soundless aquarium again. For half a second, her hands flexed like she was rehearsing a motion. Caldwell took a step backward without meaning to. James set his jaw the way people do before football. "We're going to keep you in the quiet room for now," Dr. Hua said, still calm, like she was offering a blanket. "We're being cautious." Nina smiled without warmth and said, "No." And then the rest of her body answered along a path we weren't invited to see. She moved. Sophie moved. The AED sat between them like a boundary stone. Malik took one step forward, big and quiet. James took two, integrating himself into a line that hadn't been agreed upon. I stepped around the bar with a bar towel in my hand because muscle memory is a stupidly loyal thing. What happened next is simple to describe without ugliness. That's the only way I know how to tell it. Nina was not herself. She reached for the closest arm, Sophie's. Sophie slipped the grip, trained and quick, pivoted, and guided Nina back toward the quiet room with firm hands and a wide stance, saying, "We're okay." Nina moved again with a speed that didn't match the fatigue we'd seen an hour before. Her fingers raked the air. She pushed, not strong enough to throw a grown person, but wrong in that it was not the push of someone asking for help. You could feel when it became only force. Malik stepped in with his hands up, and between the three of them they contained her, gently, carefully, the way you see two flight attendants restrain a flyer having a panic attack in a video you never needed to watch. There was no blood. There were no cinematic thuds. There was sweat and effort and breath in, breath out. They got her inside. The door closed. The latch clicked. Sophie leaned her head against the wood and closed her eyes for the duration of one shaky breath. James looked at the knives again. "You're going to need to..." "No," Lara said, no mistaking the word. "Defend yourselves," he finished, but the sentence felt like it had come from a story he told himself too often. "If what's out there is in here..." "What's out there is panic," Dr. Hua said. "Here, we manage the inside of the room." James nodded once, but the nod was for himself. "We set watches, 2 by the glass to observe, 1 near the quiet room, in shifts with Sophie, 1 at the shutter to listen. Lara and I worked food, turned coffee into something resembling routine, kept water going in and out of cups at a predictable rate. Priya wrote names on a legal pad of everyone in the lounge and made notes, asterisks by those who felt unwell or worried they might. Reeves split headphone time between the radio and his own mind. Malik checked the ceiling vents with a maintenance key and confirmed we could cut airflow to the quiet room without starving it of oxygen. We made decisions without thinking of them as decisions, because to call them that would have made them heavier. By midday, the second day, we had our first fight. It wasn't about what you would think. It was about power. Electrical. The outlets by the south wall had tripped and needed a reset in the electrical closet only Malik knew how to read. Caldwell wanted all power prioritized to the far corner where he'd set up his little court. 3 phones, a battery pack, a laptop. The teacher, her name was Renee, wanted power for the children to watch something with bright shapes so their attention could melt for 15 blessed minutes. The travel nurse, Anya, wanted the outlet line for the medical mini-fridge to stay hot no matter what, because that was where we had placed insulin and a few other medications we found after asking quietly and without judgment. "Medical first," I said. "Who decides that?" Caldwell asked. "The bartender?" "Who else?" Malik said, and it felt like a right answer and a lot of wrong ones at once. In a normal world, a bartender never decides anything of consequence. But this wasn't that world. I took the power strip from Caldwell's corner and moved it to the children's screen time station for 15 minutes, then moved it back to charge his devices for 15 minutes more. I put a sticky note over the switch on the medical fridge and wrote, "Do not touch," in block letters. Caldwell watched me like I'd insulted his ancestors. Renee mouthed, "Thank you," without volume. Anya nodded once. A professional acknowledgement, not gratefulness so much as recognition of triage when she saw it. The third person who changed didn't do it all at once. He was a man in a fleece with a tech company logo, slender, with an athlete's discipline in his posture. At breakfast, he complained of a headache that hadn't responded to water. He ate one half of a sandwich because his partner urged him to. By afternoon, his eyes kept returning to the glass, like a moth convincing itself the lamp was a moon. By evening, he stood and drifted toward the shutter at the front entrance and placed both hands on the metal as if to feel the temperature. James intercepted him with the soft, slow authority he wanted to wear like a badge, and the man looked at James like you'd look at a photograph you couldn't quite place. "Let's sit," James said. "I'm listening," the man answered, but to something far away. When James guided him to a chair near the quiet room, the man went willingly, then in the span of one sentence tried to leave, not to the bar, not to the bathroom, but straight towards the shutter again. Hands, arms, body aimed with the ease of gravity. I remember the way he placed his feet. Heel, toe, like a march to a beat he couldn't change. Malik stepped up, and the man did what people do when a large, kind person asks you to stay. He stayed. He didn't fight, he just didn't stop trying to leave. We moved him to the quiet room with calm hands and repeating words. We made the room warmer in there by a degree and dimmed the lights. We set a chair against the door. "Whatever this is," Dr. Hua said, "it wants people to move toward the outside, toward noise, toward motion. It's a pull." She lifted her hand like a conductor and dropped it. "We break lines of sight. We keep routines. We refuse the pull." We lasted 2 days like that, refusing the pull. It sounds like a victory. It was more like a rope we were both holding, and our hands got worse at it. Meals got smaller. People got quieter and then sharp. Caldwell wanted to triage assets, and by that, he meant food in a pile by his seat. Laura shut that down with a voice I'd only heard when she negotiated with a supplier about a delayed shipment the week before Christmas. "You don't know our inventory, so you don't get to plan for it," she said. And then she physically moved the snack bins to the other end of the bar, just to make a point. Caldwell looked like he'd been denied a role in a play he had written for himself. James started speaking in contingencies. "If we had to move," he said to me at the ice bin, quiet enough that no one else heard, "we'd go back of house. There's a service corridor. Freight lift. From there, depending on where the breach is, we could get to the staff security checkpoint or the catering dock. The dock leads to the service road. The service road leads to the perimeter." He drew lines in the condensation on the bin with one finger. "We'd need a badge," he said. "Malik has one, but it's limited. We'd need someone at Ops to buzz us through. Or we'd need to trick the door." "Trick it how?" I asked, and then realized I didn't want to know any answer that involved the words pry or bypass. "Alarmed doors, fail-safe on fire," he said. "But that's not a plan so much as a last resort we'd all regret." "We're not looting a mall," I told him. "We're not setting fires." "Fate may set it for us," he said, "or someone panicking. Panic runs faster than we do." That night, panic ran. It was not ours at first. Below us, the crowd thinned to the kind of people who move without moving, who drift, who seem to be listening to a frequency transmitted by a world that forgot us. The airport police were done patrolling. The retail shutters looked like teeth. A vending machine lay on its back with its front cracked but intact, the way only indestructible machines can look like they lost a fight. The escalator lights at the far end blinked, then went dark, then on again. At 3 in the morning, A man inside the lounge stood up abruptly and ran at the shutter with no speech between the thought and the movement. Not our tech man from the quiet room, not Nina, not an obvious case. It was the retired man in the fleece. Renee tried to catch his sleeve. She couldn't. He hit the shutter running. The shutter rang like a coin being dropped on a marble floor. The man bounced off and fell, breath knocked out of him, eyes confused. James and Malik were there in 2 steps, not rough, not cruel, just hands and bodies and a controlled tone. They brought him to a chair by the bar and handed him water and spoke to him as if talking to a sleepwalker, which is exactly what they were doing, just not in the way you'd think. We had an outbreak and a mutiny without anyone intending either one. Caldwell stood on the low step near the wine fridge and said, with a voice that wanted to be on a stage, "We need to choose who gets protection if the door opens. We can't save everyone, that's just numbers." "Sit down," Lara said. "You're asking me to sit down when I'm telling you the truth," he said, and did not sit. "The truth is, we are all crew," Renee said, words clean. "The truth is resource management," Caldwell said. "If the door opens and they come in, we need bodies between them and us." "You mean between them and you," Sophie said from the quiet room door, flat as facts. "And no." "You don't get to decide that," Caldwell said. "That's what you've been told your whole life, that you and your money get to decide," Malik said, finally letting his voice get bigger than the room. It was the only time he did. The words stayed up in the rafters. "Tonight we decide. We, the ones lifting, the ones counting, the ones keeping a thermometer in our back pocket, we decide to stay human." "Humanity is a strategy, not a virtue," Caldwell said. "Now you sound like a brochure for a product nobody asked for," I told him, because if I didn't, the pressure in my chest would have had to go somewhere else. We slept in shorter shifts that night. We dreamed about the same thing, doors that opened in the wrong direction. In the morning, I woke to find Priya at the bar making lists with a pencil and a packet of sugar. The lists were of the kind that save a morning. Who had been seen by Dr. Hua? Who had eaten? Who had slept? Whose phone still rang when called? Seeing your own name in a column labeled "slept" can put power in your legs. She pushed me a cup of coffee without saying anything, the way people hand you a life preserver in movies about boats you never thought you'd be on. Then, the thing we were afraid of arrived with the calm of an appointment kept. The fire panel beeped 3 times and flashed a code. Duct smoke in a zone that included the concourse but not the lounge. Malik stood and walked to the panel with the unconcern of a man who has silenced 1,000 false alarms and the focus of a man who knew this one wasn't false. When he acknowledged the alarm, the mag locks in the entire zone clicked into their default state. On our shutter, the lock status light flipped from steady red to pulsing amber. "That means the door will pop if pushed," Malik said. "Fail safe? Power is still to the motor, so it holds, until someone pushes. Then it lifts on demand." "On whose demand?" Caldwell asked, already moving toward the door. "On any demand," Malik said. He moved faster than Caldwell and set his shoulders into the shutter, body a wedge. "We hold," he told me. "Luca, bar mats. We'll jam the bottom." We slid the thick black rubber bar mats under the shutter to make its path uneven. We wedged a beverage cart sideways between the floor and the lower edge like a chalk under a wheel. We pulled a table parallel to the shutter so that if it tried to rise, it would have to push furniture as well as air. A handful of lounge members, crew now, all of us, formed a line without anyone asking. Palms up and bodies wide, we did not look like soldiers. We looked like people whose feet knew which way to point. The shutter moved. Not much, an inch or 2. It was the inch you feel in your stomach when an elevator starts or stops. Another inch. Someone outside was pushing. The mats buckled. The cart squealed. The table shook and then settled into a new stubbornness. We put our hands flat against the metal, and the metal was suddenly the only thing in common between strangers. "Hold," Malik said, voice steady. We held. The shutter pressed up against our weight and then settled, frustrated by physics and design and the fact that we wanted it more than whatever was asking it to rise. There was no snarling outside, no monster, just pressure, just the gravity of movement. If this were a different kind of story, this is where you'd expect a breakthrough nobody wanted and a fight nobody celebrates. Instead, what we got was time we didn't know what to do with. The pressure lasted minutes, then released by degrees. The shutter settled back into its track with a resigned sigh. The amber light still pulsed, which meant the rules had not returned. The fire panel still insisted that somewhere smoke and air were having a conversation that would end badly for someone. But for the moment, the room was ours. "We need an exit strategy," James said. "Now." "We need a plan that doesn't use words like sacrifice," Renee said. "We go back of house," Malik said, for the first time, not as speculation but as a sentence that had gravity. "I can get us into the maintenance corridor. From there, freight lift to catering. Catering has a roll-up door to the service road. If the road is safe, questionable, we can follow it to the perimeter gate near the ARFF station. ARFF will be manned, if anything is. They have comms that reach the outside." "How many?" Caldwell said. "We can't move everyone at once." "We don't," Malik said. "We move groups. We take people who need medical. We take children. We take staff. We take people who can move equipment. We leave notes and come back." "And if you don't come back," Caldwell said. "Then you do it without me," Malik said, and I realized then that leadership has nothing to do with being the loudest person in the room. We made lists again. It took us 20 minutes to agree on 15 names for the first group. 15. Because that's what Malik said the freight lift tolerated without doing that jumpy motion that made everyone want to step off at the last second. Children and their guardians. Anya, the nurse. Sophie and Dr. Hua, to carry both medicine and comm. 2 of the strongest men who were not Malik, because we needed Malik to anchor the second group that would prepare the rest to move. Me, because the staff knew the back hallway anatomy, and because I have the kind of face that makes people follow directions even when they don't want to hear them. Reeves opted to stay, not because he wasn't strong, he was, but because he needed to keep listening. "If the tower comes back," he said, "we'll know where we are." We packed with the efficiency of people cleaning up after a party with the cops on the way. Water in the rolling beverage cart, the one with the lock that never sits straight. Crackers and a few of the sandwiches still safe to eat. The AED, the medical kit, a roll of duct tape, a handful of cable ties that became in our hands, a joke about fasteners for all occasions, and nothing more. Chef's knives stayed on the magnetic strip. We took a heavy ladle and a broom and called them tools. We wore our jackets and our best shoes. We took nothing that couldn't be accepted back out of our hands once we were safe enough to remember that things have owners. Malik passed me the staff key for the service door, a brass rectangle with a groove worn down the middle. "If I drop it, you have it," he said. "If you drop it, we turn around." The service door was behind the wine display, in a seam so perfect it didn't look like a door. We had used it 1,000 times to get to the back corridor, a narrow artery with beige paint and 2 emergency lights that never turned off. The door had a bar you push and a sticker that said this door is alarmed. Activated by the fire panel, it wasn't. When Malik pressed the bar and the seal broke, the smell of the real airport flowed in. a mix of cleaners and cold air and the long tail of 1,000 meals. It smelled somehow like honesty. We went into the corridor in single file. The walls were close enough that your shoulders brushed. The sound changed immediately, from carpet quiet to concrete echo. We closed the lounge door behind us and Lara turned the lock. James took the rear, for reasons that might have been selfish or not. I couldn't read him yet, not really. We kept the lighting low, not because we were sneaking, but because the back of house is always dim like this, as if light is a resource too. At the end of the corridor was a badge reader and a heavy door with hinges you could hang a truck on. Malik flashed his badge. Secured identification display area, this is where it mattered, and the light went from red to green without argument. Beyond it, a cross hall with a scuffed floor. Signs stenciled on the wall. Catering mechanical freight lift ahead. We passed a gray door marked electrical, where a hum promised both safety and danger. We passed a cart stacked with empty chafing dishes and a smell of rosemary that made my stomach do a slow, sad flip. At the freight lift, Malik pressed call and held his breath for 5 seconds. That felt like dissertation defense and speed dating and air traffic control all at once. The lift came with an exhale of cables and a clunk. Inside, it smelled like cardboard and clean. There was a multilingual decal inside with a capacity in kilograms and pounds and a reminder to secure all loads. We didn't have a load to secure, only our hearts. We got in, 15 of us. I stood at the door with my hand on the rail and watched the floor number change. The lift moved down, smooth for the first half, and then jittering as if it too was thinking of changing its mind. When the door opened, the air got colder and carried a whisper of outdoors. Catering. The dock area was a semi-open space with pallets lined like soldiers and shrink wrap reflecting fluorescent aim like rain on a different planet. The roll-up door was closed, but light bled around its edges. The pedestrian door to the right had a push bar and a panic alarm that gave one set half beep, and then remembered it had other priorities. Malik put a hand flat on the roll-up door. Cold carried through steel. He nodded, made the decision, lifted the bar on the pedestrian door, and cracked it 2 inches. We had a view of Service Road, a strip of asphalt cramped between concrete and chain link, lined with small white paint hieroglyphs that meant more to trucks than to people. It was quiet. In the distance, an ARFF truck's silhouette sat like a dragon with its mouth closed. We went out, one after another, shoulders brushing. The sky was the color mornings get when they forget for a second to be blue. The airport's noises were farther away, as if someone had placed a pillow between you and the runway. Nothing moved on the road. In the distance, near the corner of the building where a maintenance stair went up like a fire escape to nowhere, something that might have been a person swayed without rhythm. We did not examine it closely. We turned left toward the ARFF station. Moving outside was like remembering a word you couldn't find for 2 days. We breathed differently. The children looked at the big trucks like seeing a parade. They didn't know the difference between a day where you point and giggle and a day where you learn something about radius and reach. We covered 100 meters and then 2. We passed a gate where a keypad blinked a stubborn denial. We passed a stack of pallets that had become a sculpture of indecision. We moved like we had the right to be here, which is half of moving anywhere at all. At the ARFF station, the service door was ajar. That should have made me feel welcome. It didn't. Inside, the fluorescent light did what it does, flattened things. The garage door for the fire truck was closed. A boot lay near a locker as if abandoned mid-conversation. A radio sat in a charging cradle and hissed with a frequency that meant life. An office down the hall had its chair turned on its side. An automatic coffee pot had brewed air down to brown sugar on hot plate. We looked for people. We found a map of the airfield, a row of helmets, and a stack of paper stating procedures for spills. Then a voice. Help? It wasn't loud. It wasn't even brave. It traveled down the hall like a paper airplane you throw without standing up. An RFF technician. Brown hair, 30, a name patch that read Dan, sat against a wall near the break room. One hand pressed to his forearm where a strip of gauze was taped. The gauze was not blooming. His face was drained of the courage I'm certain he had 2 days before. An oxygen tank stood nearby like a sentinel. It's quiet, he said. It's too quiet. He shook his head. Who are you? A lounge, Malik said. A group. We need help moving more groups. Dan nodded as if this were the kind of thing that could be put on a shift change log. We lost comms with ops an hour ago, he said. Tower can hear us maybe 1 in 4 times. Perimeter gates are on manual. ARFF-1 left earlier for a response near the fence. I was told to hold and call for no one. You're not alone, I said, because I needed someone to say it aloud. People are different out there, Dan said, eyes going to the garage door like the truck could overhear him. Some walk toward the sound, some don't. The ones who do, they don't stop. He looked at the children and flinched, then breathed out and steadied. We can open the roll-up, he said. We can get you onto the service road we can escort. Escort to where? Sophie asked. Dan looked toward the far end of the building where a glass sliding door showed sunshine on tarmac. Perimeter Gate 2, he said. The roads beyond are, I don't know, but there are county responders out there, or there were. We left Anya with Dan to swap bandages properly. We used the station's whiteboard and a marker that still worked to draw the route from lounge to dock to road to gate. Lines and arrows and names like little prayers. We radioed back to Reeves on a borrowed handheld from the station, and he answered on our same measured channel like we were playing at being professionals and had accidentally become them. He reported that the lounge was holding and that Group 2 was ready. The door is a question mark, he said, but so are all of them. We ran the first group in a small convoy. Dan on foot, us around the children like parentheses, the nurse at the rear. At Perimeter Gate 2, the manual release crank turned like a rusty idea and then took. The gate rose. Outside, a road I had driven as a teenager stretched like a promise and a dare. On the other side of the road, 2 sheriff's vehicles sat at odd angles, their light bars off, their doors closed. The world beyond the fence looked exactly like a world that would not help you unless you made the first move. We placed the first group just beyond the gate inside a fenced triangle that kept them contained but not trapped. Sophie and Renee organized blankets. Dr. Hua wrote names and ages on a pad like she'd been doing it all her life. Dan stood with his hand on a lever like a man learning how to be a drawbridge. We go back, Malik said. We do this again. We did it again. We went back along the service road, past the pallets that were sculptures, past the keypad that blinked like stubbornness. We crossed the dock. We pressed the freight lift button and used the seconds to breathe like we weren't already thinking of what we'd say if the door to the lounge was no longer a door. It opened. Lara's face was the face of someone who had been counting and was relieved the sum matched the numbers. Reeves reported that the shutter had flexed twice and then given up. James reported that Caldwell had tried to move the snack bin again and had been persuaded not to by a combination of words, and James's ability to occupy the same space as a problem without touching it. The quiet room stayed closed. Nina was still inside. The other man too. Anya asked for a look-in, and Sophie shook her head once. Not now, she said. We keep calm, and calm is a resource. We made the second group. Caldwell insisted on being in it, and to my surprise, no one argued. His partner needed escorting, and even jerks can carry weight. James went with them because someone needed to be the kind of serious he was, and doing nothing turned that kind of man into poison. Malik stayed this time. I took his badge. "You saw the route," he said. "You can read a door, you're fast." He didn't say kind, but I heard it. We took the second group to the dock, the lift, the road. On the way, near the maintenance stair, the shape we hadn't examined closely became a person who noticed us. He, or they, it didn't matter, tilted their head as if the sound of our feet had spoken their name. Then they moved. Not a run. Something between falling and drifting. It was wrong enough that you felt wrong watching it. Caldwell made a sound he would later pretend he didn't. And James again became the thing he thought he was. Slow hands guiding people faster than they thought they could move. We did not test the person's interest in us. We turned left and followed the road and kept the line tight. The person did not chase. They swayed and then stepped in a different direction, toward a noise we could not hear, and that was both mercy and warning. We delivered the second group to the triangle by the gate and returned for the third. We were efficient now, which is horrifying to realize about escaping. In the lounge, the amber light above the shutter had gone solid red again. The fire panel had taken a breath and decided it could pretend to be a tool and not a weather vane. Reeves reported the tower had gone to a schedule of short, clipped calls, like a heartbeat you monitor without being able to do anything about. We made 4 trips. Each time, the road was both friend and corridor. Each time we passed the shape that swayed. Each time, the air smelled a little more like outside and a little less like indoor courage. On the 5th, I didn't see Nina leave the quiet room. It would be cleaner if I could tell you I saw the handle turn, that we had a cinematic moment when I locked eyes and saw a person I'd greeted 6 hours before look past me like I was already history. But real life carries its turning points in the pockets you don't check often enough. She was in the hall when we returned with the 4th group's absence in our hands and the 5th's names in our mouths. She stood, shoulders slack, eyes bright and not quite focused, and then she was moving toward the service door with the sort of aim people use when their body remembers a dance they learned in childhood. Sophie saw it first. She moved like a metronome set to rescue. Malik stepped in to make the hall narrower with his body. James put a hand against the wall in a way that reminded me he had always wanted to be a door. Nina did not snarl. She did not speak. She applied motion to the problem of a closed door like water works on stone. We were not going to win a long fight, only a short race, so we chose a short race. "Luca," Malik said. "Now." That one word put my feet on the path I had not noticed I had been rehearsing. I took the remaining names for Group 5, pulled them with words and gentle hands, and steered them into the service corridor. Laura had the lounge door open in a way that told me she had been ready to do this for an hour. Dr. Hua pressed a hand to my back. Anya counted children, then adults, then her hands without putting anything down. We moved. I do not know who held Nina in those next seconds. I know it wasn't violent because I am telling you a story for voices that don't want that. I know Malik and James and Sophie made a triangle that contained one person without turning her into a monster. I know Lara's breath came fast and hard as she closed the door and turned the lock. I know I had the key Malik gave me and I used it like I had been born to have that small brass rectangle in my palm. I know the corridor ahead of me had stopped being a corridor and become a tunnel. We made the 5th trip with our heart rates where they had no right to be. We placed the 5th group at the gate and gave them blankets we had not known we owned. The sheriff's vehicles beyond the fence still sat at their angles, still doors shut, still no light bars, which meant either safety or a story I did not want to read yet. Dan cranked the gate again, muscle and lever and repetition. The road beyond was a road beyond. We could have walked until the airport was a rumor. We did not. We had one more trip to make. When we returned for the 6th, the lounge was quieter than it should have been. Reeves stood with his radio dangling from his hand like a microphone after the last song of the night. Lara's face had the drained look of a waitress at bar close when the dishwasher broke and someone left without paying. Malik had one hand on the counter and the other on his knee, breathing in a way that says, "I lifted something that hated being lifted." "Nina?" I asked, and hated that it sounded like her name was a code for a problem, and that I meant it that way too. "She's in the quiet room," Sophie said, and I trusted that because I had to. The second gentleman, he changed. We moved him too. We locked. I looked at the glass that made the lounge a jewelry box and saw my reflection look back at me in a way I did not recognize. Down below, the concourse turned into something more like a dormitory after a party nobody wanted to remember. Bodies, people, not gone, not here, rested in ways that implied their backs would hurt when they woke. The escalators were off. A plane pushed back from a gate with nobody watching because that's what schedules want, to be kept. It rolled 3 feet and stopped as if remembering something. Outside, a tug moved with the caution of a deer picking its way through a yard where a dog might be asleep. "We run the last trip," Malik said. "Then we go." We ran the last trip. Caldwell went on that one, carrying his partner's bag like a flag he didn't have a right to. Renee went because the children were out, and she could leave now without feeling like she had abandoned chalkboards. James went because he had always intended to. Anya stayed because the medical fridge had emptied to hands, and because she wanted to be there if the quiet room changed its mind again. Sophie stayed because the door needed a person who understood doors. Lara stayed because the bar is a place that turns back into itself when its people aren't there to tend it, and she needed to see the lights off with her hands. Reeves stayed because he had learned the shape of the radio's silence and wasn't going to abandon it. I carried the last pack of bottled water down the corridor and felt the strap dig into my fingers. I pressed the freight lift button like a nerve. The door opened. We stepped in. The floor jumped in that habit it had. The door opened at the bottom, the air outside colder than fear. We crossed to the ARFF station again. Dan looked like he hadn't blinked. We walked the road back to the gate. We lifted the gate. We passed people through like a line at a place with a bouncer who had suddenly decided kindness was the rule. "Go," I told Caldwell, because it was my turn to be the person who gives permission to someone who never asked for it. "Keep walking until your shoes complain." Yes," he said. And for the first time he looked like he might understand that he was not the main character in every room he entered. He took his partner's hand. They went. I turned and looked at the airport like a man saying goodbye to a city he loved but didn't trust to love him back. Then I ran the last trip in reverse. Gate down, road back, dock, lift, corridor. At the lounge door I knocked our knock. 3 quick, 1 slow, 3 quick, and heard the lock turn. Lara pulled me in and closed it and leaned her forehead against the wood for 1 full second like a prayer. "What now?" I asked. "Now we go," she said. "We do not wait for a rule to change." We gathered what remained. Anya's bag, the AED, now a habit, the empty water boxes crushed down for no good reason except neatness, the power strip with the strip of tape I had labeled "Do Not Touch." We wrote a note in thick marker and taped it to the bar. Food in fridge. Water under sink. Quiet room locked. Do not open without PPE. We are heading to perimeter gate 2 with groups. Use service corridor. Follow arrows. Good luck. I added a heart because sometimes you're allowed to be corny. We passed the quiet room and paused. Sophie stood with her palm flat to the frosted glass again, mirroring the first hours like a bookend. "Be well," she said, soft to the people inside or to the air or to herself. We walked on. The service corridor didn't get any wider. We got more certain. At the freight lift, I pressed the button and felt the tremor of our future. I looked at Lara and Malik and Sophie and Reeves and Anya and Dan, who had come up the road to find us because you don't leave your new crew at the gate without one last handshake. "You're the bar," Dan said to me. "You make the room stay a room." "That's the job," I said. It is. The lift opened. We stepped in, the door closed, and the light flicked from floor to floor. We were a small group of people who had decided we would remain people in a place that had decided to experiment with the idea. I thought of lemons and chilled metal and a strip of rubber under a door. I thought of a bartender's grip on a glass and how that is not the same as a grip on anything else, and how it was enough. We did not escape to fanfare. We did not drive a truck through a barricade or light a flare to call down a helicopter. We walked under fluorescent lights and through doors meant for staff, and along a road painted for vehicles, and out a gate that had lived most of its life on automatic and had been surprised to discover it could be opened by a human arm and a lever. We followed signs that said hydrant and stop and 15 miles per hour, and discovered that the world beyond was full of signs too, and that if you read them with care, you can go places even when you're afraid. There were days after this. Of course there were. The road past the fence wasn't simpler than the gorgeously complicated place we left. It was complicated in new, clumsy ways. County responders were there, and they said words that felt like stairs to climb rather than doors slamming shut. The lounge became a memory that smelled like lemon and clean glass and the sound a shutter makes when it resists and then thinks better of it. The quiet room stayed in my mind a long time, and I do not know how its story ended, and it is a mercy and a burden that I never will. In the days that followed, when people asked what we did in there, I told them the truth. We counted water and kept lists and refused to let panic teach us how to move. We held a door down with our hands on the weight of furniture and the knowledge that sometimes all you can do is say not yet to the worst thing trying to come in. We taught a rich man to wait his turn and a serious man to be serious about gentleness, and ourselves to carry a broom like it was a tool and not a weapon. We followed the maintenance lines, the staff shortcuts, the hidden arteries of a building built for order when order was a language the world could speak. We decided to be crew, not customers. We were left, and we left together. When a guest today asks me what the Oriole Sky Lounge was like, I say soundproofed glass, warm light, engines winking on the horizon. The kind of place where you can forget you're in a machine on its way to somewhere else. And if they ask me what it was like during the days that weren't days, I tell them, we made a room out of a situation. We made a plan out of a hallway. We made it out because we never stopped making it ours. Then I cut a lemon in a clean line and lay the slice on the rim like a little moon that knows how to pull at tides without making a scene. And I keep my eye on the door because that finally is what I know. How to welcome and how to hold, and when the time comes, how to open. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.